Hello and welcome to another episode of Get Out of Rap. I'm super pleased to be joined by a good friend of mine, good friend of the team leader community, an all-round superstar, Danny Wareham, who, when I was writing this banner, I was thinking I'm going to run out of space because author of Constellation, psychologist, coach, speaker, founder of Firgun, and many other things. So, Danny, welcome to Get Out of Rap.
Thank you, Martin. Always a pleasure just to riff and chat with you as well. And you're right, I'm going to need bigger business cards, aren't I?
You are, no doubt they're going to be very inventive knowing you.
Well, we'll see. I know a man who can do that sort of stuff and tell me how silly my designs look. They help me out with the book, to be fair. But how's life treating you? You well?
Yes, good. I get variously inspired from people both within the community and our industry, and definitely inspired always by you. But on my bookcase, you can't see it in this view, but on my bookcase, I do have a lovely signed copy that I'm hoping will be worth millions one day of.
I think signing it makes it worth less.
But yeah, I've been variously inspired by you, none more so than reading Constellation, which is what we're here to talk about. I do have a little image, and I love the phrase here: "What if leadership didn't need a leader?" And I have a question to kick us off, if that's okay.
Mhm.
Did you have that concept that led to the book, or did that come about as a result of writing the book?
It's a really interesting point because it's a bit of both. So I never intended to write a book. What happened was I was at university doing a master's after coming out of the corporate world. I've been in contact centers for about 25 years at the time. And I'd spent a lot of time around leaders. I'd led operations myself. Um, but it wasn't until I started studying leadership that I realized I'd never really thought about what leadership actually is. Um, and one of the things that academia does terribly well or terribly poorly is argue with itself over definitions. So we don't have a definition of leadership. We don't have a definition of culture. We don't have we're too busy arguing with ourselves to actually come up with something. So when we started reading about leadership, what I found was there's hundreds of different theories, and in all of them, a leader is a person. So, and I found that odd because all the examples in my world, I always thought a leader was somebody that got out the way. You know, my job was to remove barriers for others or create the environment where other people would thrive. And that meant if I went on holiday, you know, performance or team loyalty or any of these other factors that happen within groups didn't change. You know, it didn't matter if I was in the room. So that was kind of the thought that went through my head is, I don't mean it to come across as a Danny knows best and leaders aren't people at all. I just thought it was odd that the only way that we'd study leaders was as if they were a person. And then after I'd published that research, which we may well delve into if you want me to bore you somewhat with the background, but when I'd published that back in 2022 as a paper, I started to see other people talking about forms of leaderless leadership, who leads when the leader's not in the room. And it had been exacerbated by COVID and everybody working from home when the leader literally isn't in the room. And it was at that point I thought, I need to turn this into something and give it back to academia. Here's a completely new, previously unstudied model. Go and have a play with it. Go and tell me if it's any good. Go and investigate it and research it yourself, build on it. Tell me it's terrible. It doesn't matter, but let's get it into academia and have a play. So it was a bit of both. It was a bit of a, what is leadership really? Not really sure. Then it was a bit of an epiphany of this just feels completely normal. You know, not everywhere has a leader, but there's clearly something organizing. And then let's put the two things together and put pen to paper, so to speak.
Now, I have some questions on that, but before we jump into that, this is a book that I know there's an image I just want to take. I'll take you to in a second. I thought, oh, that is so cool. But this is a book that's available not only on Amazon, Spotify, Audible, but also on your high street bookstore, right?
It is. It is. When I published the book, there's a couple of different routes to market that you can do, and like everything in life, there's trade-offs. So traditional publishing, basically, your book is a commodity. So you go to a Kogan or a Wiley, etc., and you give them a business case as to why they should stock your book. And what happens is they take control of the marketing. So they decide where it's being distributed, when it gets released, etc. But the trade-off is they do all the heavy lifting. There's no investment. And also it gives you access to their distribution, so you can get it into bookshops. Option 2 is self-publishing, which is really easy to do, for better or for worse, because there's a lot of great self-published books out there, but there's also a lot of there's a lot that could do with some spell checking, let's say. That's really good if you want control of your marketing. So if you want to release a book next week, and you want to get it out there, if it doesn't sell, it will still be available because it's printed on demand. The trade-off is you can't get into physical bookshops. Physical bookshops will not take a chance on a self-published author. In part because if they don't sell the books, they have to destroy them, and there's a charge that goes back to the self-published author. And the third way is what I did. So I set up a company as a publishing imprint, which gives me all of the benefits of speed to market, gives me control of the marketing, for better or for worse, but it also means I can get around the world. And I was actually looking at sales figures for yesterday, just overnight, over the weekend rather, and I sold more physical copies in the USA on Saturday than I did in the UK. That's the first time that's happened that I'm aware of. But the trade-off is you cover everything. So you have to pay for your marketing, you have to shout about the book, you have to come on and shamelessly prostitute yourself on Get Out a Rap.
I can't think of many things worse.
Yeah, so it is available everywhere. Yeah, it's like Old Spice. It's available in chemists, butchers.
Oh, what a classic! what a classic though. It still smells good. But the image that I thought, I just thought that is so cool, was you with the receipt from Waterstones.
Yes.
Now, I love a Waterstones. That must have been a lovely, lovely moment.
It was surreal, is the only way I can describe it, because I don't think of myself as a writer or an author at all. So to see your book on the shelf, and it's in the same section as some giants. I mean, John Amichi's book was there, The Promises of Giants, which I've recommended to you. It was on the same shelf, a couple of books down from Simon Sinek's Start With Why. There's special 15-year anniversary. So there was something, I'm not an excitable person, but there was something kind of giddying about going, well, I've got my own book. And there was also something slightly narcissistic, that when I went to the counter with it, I was half expecting the lady behind the counter to say, oh, when she saw my name on the card as well as on the book, that she might say, oh, are you related, or are you the author? But alas, she didn't say anything at all. And there was a little bit of me that was a bit disappointed. However, knowing me, I'd probably been a bit mortified if she had noticed as well. So
you're not going back in there with a cardboard cutout of you then?
Just of myself, yes.
Yeah.
Do you know who I am? No? So yes, I bought the copy. I still have that copy, the kind of first edition, and I've kept the receipt, which will be framed with the book at some point, I'm sure, across the cover of the book, maybe. But yeah, very, very surreal, very strange, excited, slight disappointment you didn't recognize me. My picture's in the book. Haven't you read it yet? And also quite proud. Yeah, lots of photos. My partner went with me, and she must have about 50 pictures in her camera reel of me outside. All of them I look terrible. But yeah, a surreal moment.
You should be proud. I think anyone that knows you, I think feels it was just such a lovely, warm feeling to think, yeah, I know him. He's a good guy, and yeah, there's so many people that are really pleased for you and rooting for you. Before we get into the book, you mentioned, like, did we want to delve into the research? And the answer is yes. Like, what? Because that was the, after the original Let's Study Leadership, what did you find then when you were researching it that led to you writing that paper?
Well, the original research was, can you take the leader out of a group? And not only is performance not impacted, but actually it might improve. That was kind of the research question. So I looked around for a few scenarios of where that is likely to be done. And we settled on agile project management. And within agile project management, there's a section called a scrum. And for those that don't know, although I'm sure if you work in a contact center, everybody knows agile and scrum. But essentially, there's a to-do list. There's a project to-do list, which is defined by the kind of product owner. And then there's a scrum to-do list, which is defined by a team of experts that are assembled. And they take that to-do list into a figurative room and lock themselves away for 1 to 4 weeks. And at the end of it, they come out hopefully with a load of work achieved and things that they didn't achieve, they call a backlog. Whilst they're in that room, they have a leader called a scrum master. And a scrum master's role, we know, changes based on how experienced that group are. So if it's a relatively new or inexperienced group, it tends to be the scrum master tends to be more directive. So they help with things like the methodology. If they are more experienced, then they're more of a servant leadership, and they're there should they need any help, etc. So that was the scenario. I thought, can you get rid of the scrum master? If everybody knows why they're there and everybody knows what they're hoping to achieve, then can they self-organize? And the too long didn't read is it depends. It really depends. There was a couple of moderating factors. So there were some that were not, they won't set the world on fire. So for example, if it's an inexperienced team, then what they think a good project looks like is actually quite transactional. So did we get things done? They're off the to-do list. Were they delivered on time? The more experienced, the more qualitative the measures were. So things like, what's the quality of the work I hand over to the next stage? Or did the team learn how to work together better? So nothing exciting there. What was exciting, though, was that if you were brand new to the team and you had 20 years of project managing experience, so you were very skilled in this arena. If you were new to the team, you were perceived as having no skill. You had to earn your stripes again. And actually the team, even though it had a lot of objective quality and a lot of expertise, they would still behave like an inexperienced team and deliver transactional stuff. And the same if you work in a large organization. So in small organizations, there's a lot more autonomy and everybody tries a bit of something, and it's okay to not perform at a top level because we know that that's not your day job. So for example, you might be a salesperson in an employee of 10 in a company, but actually the salesperson also works the reception and also occasionally has to go and do X, Y, and Z. But there is an acceptance that you're not going to be able to do everything great. Whereas in big companies where you get more specialism, we tend to see it revert towards that transactional again. It's not in my job description, therefore I won't do it. And also you start to see leadership, rather than being kind of transactional, helping with the methodology, or being more kind of servant and helping with the environment, you actually start to see more what I call guard dog behavior. So this is, can you stop external factors? Can you deal with the politics of the office and stop them trying to throw additional work into my work stream? So it's still a hands-off style of leadership, but it's a defend me so I can get on with my stuff. And the third finding was none of that happened in the military. So in Civvy Street, we needed a certain amount of time. It was, according to the data, it was up to around about 8 years of experience as a team together, compared to work completely autonomously. For the military, in all cohorts, whether that was Navy, Army, Marines, etc., it was 1 day, literally from day one. And it's because they codify trust differently. So what I mean by that is in Civvy Street, we build trust on an individual, interpersonal, one-by-one approach. Do I trust you? And as a result, that takes time to build up that kind of social capital and currency to trust someone. Whereas the military see trust as contextual.
Mm.
So we're going to display and systemize some of our trust. Things like, I can look at your uniform and see, what battles have you been in? I know you've gone through the same basic training, so I know your level of competency is at a certain level. So instead of asking, do I trust you? Because trust is also contextual. You're new to my squadron. I won't trust you with my wife, but I trust that you know what you're doing and you've got my back. Whereas in Civvy Street, we treat trust as this homogenous thing that I need to trust you in all environments at all the time. And that's why it's so much more difficult to build. So the shortened version of that is the type of leadership that people want it's nothing surprising. If I'm new, hold my hand. If I'm experienced, let me go. The org size means that we start to see politics and stuff getting in and messing about. And we can systemize trust. If we look at what they do in the military and armed services, they use competency as a proxy for trust, rather than I've got to build it on an individual case-by-case basis, which is why when we change teams, suddenly we've got to earn our stripes again.
That's so interesting. And then you took that, and was it intentional to think, you mentioned earlier asking people to play with it, agree with it, try and break it, disprove it. Mm-hmm. Did that mean that it was like, right, let's take this to, I don't want to use the word extreme, but let's just take this to, you don't need leaders, mm-hmm. and back that up and say to people, what do you think of this? Because I know when I read it, it's very hard not to think, how would this thinking back to teams I'd led, mm-hmm. and think, how would that have worked? Oh yeah, I could. Yeah, there's examples of this. There's examples of that. Was it to really get people thinking that it was right? We're going to have leaderless leadership.
There was two motives for writing the book. The first was for the academics. This and the leadership purists, the people that research leadership, this model has never been studied previously. So it's all primary data, which means it's very specific. So it's only been tested in agile project methodology in the lab. So the first reason for writing was to get it into academia, to get it into universities, to get it onto reading lists, so that people can see how the evolution of leadership has always followed what we do in business. So, in the 1860s, when we first started it, it was great man. It was people with great tashes telling people to get back on that railway. When you went towards the First World War, it became, well, maybe leaders can learn. We need to train these sergeants to tell people what to do. So that kind of trait theory and behavioral styles came around. After the wars, it was let's all pull together. So there was a lot more around kind of followership and how do you motivate the people around you, and the situation. As we went towards the 1980s, it was then the era of yuppies. It was then far more neoliberal, risk and reward, carrot and stick type approaches. And today, where the focus is far more on individualism and diversity and inclusion, we're starting to see more kind of distributed and social type models. So Constellation is a evolution of that, which I think should go into academia to pull apart and build on and see what works, the same as every other model has. The second reason, and I apologize for getting soapboxy on this because I'll know I do it in advance, but we spend an awful lot of time at work. And if we're lucky enough to be able to find meaning and purpose and feel that we matter at work, that makes a difference in our lives. There's lots of studies about purposefully engaged people who will make deliver more productivity for a business. They'll take fewer days off. They're less likely to be sick. They're less likely to be absent. They're less likely to have an accident at work. And those are all true. But there are also studies that say that when you're purposefully engaged in work, when you feel that you're seen, that you belong, that you matter, and what you do makes a difference, then you're more likely to cut your neighbour's hedge. You're more likely to donate your time to community projects in your area. And we know this. We all know if we have a bad day at work, we take it home, whether we like it or not. And if we have a great day at work, we take that home too. So unfortunately, the reverse is true. Disengagement at work, keeping in mind, according to Gallup, only 18% of employees in the UK are purposely engaged in their work. Disengagement at
18.
work, 18%.
Wow.
18%. If you had a machine that was only working at 18% capacity, it was only making 18% of the widgets you thought it was supposed to make, you'd stop down tools and you'd invest in that machine. I told you it gets soapboxy. So yeah, disengagement correlates with things like family breakdowns, arguments, debt, domestic violence, and so on. So my kind of second reason was that this matters. People take their work home with them. And if you're going to rent employees from their families, you have a duty to return them in a better condition. So the second part was the book was never about let's get rid of leadership. The book is asking, can culture replace the influence of leadership? Can culture give us the steer for how to behave and how to perform and how to get things done? And designing intentional cultures is something that we tend to be pretty poor at doing, because we're so focused on creating great places to work that we forget that it's about creating places where great work is done. And that requires intentionality. So first is get it into the academia world and let them play about it. The second is let's treat culture intentionally and purposefully like the strategic tool it is, because it spills over into communities, classrooms, and kitchens.
Do you think that there's even more of a need to focus on the culture of organizations given where we are in society, or has it always been that way?
Again, really interesting question. I think it's always been there, but there is certainly more of an imperative to do it now. The kind of challenges that your parents will have had in their workplace are very different to ours. At an individual level, they might be similar, dealing with a lack of training, or, that one person in the team that's got body odor, or, the day-to-day stuff might not have changed. But now today, we're far more connected, we're far more globalized, we have access to far more information about what's going on in the world and how scary that can be. None of us live in a vacuum. And because of that, there are stresses outside of work, there are concerns and worries outside of work. And we don't have environments like in our parents' time where it was leave your baggage at the door, and rightly so. So for me, culture has always been important, but you got away with not intentionally nurturing it a certain way. You could get away with the pizza parties and dogs in the office. Whereas today, highly competitive, highly VUCA, highly interconnected and highly complex challenges that we face. I mean, just to riff, if you think of something like climate change is not going to be solved by one person. It needs to cross borders, it needs to cross jurisdictions. It's not going to be solved by one person's ideas. We need to pool ideas together. So how do you do that? And Constellation is effectively a type of distributed system where anybody can be a star and anybody can lead at any time, but it's the framework of culture that allows people to take the lead, to take the helm, and to bring all of themselves, all of their skills to the table. So it's interesting question.
But it's funny you mentioned earlier about the military, because my dad joined the RAF when he was 16, and got to the highest. He stayed in his entire career, ground crew, predominantly. Whilst he did jets, it was predominantly helicopters. And I used to spend a lot of my time growing up on the air base, in the squadron with them, in the crew room. So they would, even though he got up to warrant officer before he came out, he'd spent most of his time, corporal, sergeant, not an officer.
Yeah.
And it was always fascinated me. You mentioned something earlier about somebody could join the squadron, and I used to see that firsthand. They were ground crew fixing stuff. A brand new person would know where the tool wall was, how to sign tools out, know what to do. No one had to tell them what to do, and they operated entirely without interactions, it seemed to me anyway, they operated entirely without interaction from their officer, their squadron leader. And it was, is that because I really liked what you said there. It was kind of that there's trust in competency, there's trust in, you might be new to our squadron, but you wouldn't be here unless you were competent, and you've done this somewhere else. How much of that is also trust in the, as well as competency, but in the institutions and processes themselves? Do you need them to have a Constellation type approach?
So the short answer, because I always give long answers, so the short answer is yes, absolutely. And in the book, I try to give some practical examples of what is culture. And one of the ways that we can define culture is it's made up of the stories that we tell ourselves. So what's our kind of history? What's the language that we use, etc. Symbols, so uniforms, the language we actually use,
Badges,
acronyms, all that kind of stuff. Rituals, so what kind of just happens. Do you always park in the same space, for example? Our org structures, so how the organization is set up. Our power structures, so where the influence really lies. So, for example, you might have somebody who's on your team who hierarchically is not particularly powerful, but they've got the ear of everybody else on your team. Or you might have a small business where the managing director has the ultimate say, but you can't get time with them unless you can book it in the calendar with their EA. So where does the power really reside? And then what are the control structures? So what do we talk about? What gets measured? I had a client who was adamant they're all about customer at the heart of everything they do, which is a saying that makes me throw up in my mouth a little bit. Because everybody says it. It's one of those economics things, isn't it? Okay, if that's what you say you're about. But when we go and have a look, your stand-up meetings, your buzz sessions at the start of your contact center day, the first thing you talk about was yesterday's conversion rate and yesterday's margin. And these little things that say what your culture really is. So to come back to the point, that's how you kind of codify what are the parts, what are the moving parts within culture. And if you think of the amount of intentionality in the services around their talent attraction, their onboarding, their training when you're first into the organization, there is a huge amount of investment in the stories we tell ourselves, the language that we use, and the symbols that you use, the rituals that we do. It's very clear because the org structure hasn't changed for 100 years. How many stripes on his shoulder and what that means. So they pay a particular amount of attention to the rituals and the symbols and the codification of their culture, which then gives people freedom to do what they need to do because they know what the rules are here. If you compare that to the kind of civilian context, our onboarding approach and our talent attraction is historically awful. Awful. Dave's left. Go and get me Dave's job description. Let's go and find another Dave. I was on a podcast recently, and my first contact center job was at Argos in 1995, and on the phones. And I dug out the job description for that. And I was on a podcast talking about how AI is going to change the contact center and the workplace and so on. And I just pulled up a random contact center advisor role on Indeed, and it was almost identical to the job description from 30 years ago. So how can we acknowledge how much change has happened in that time, and yet we're still in this routine of we've got a Dave-shaped hole? So for me, having that intentionality around your culture, it makes it easy to say that talent attraction process isn't quite right, or their joining approach isn't quite right, or the development when they're in role isn't quite right, and what can we do about it? And that all comes down to, what are you looking for in the first place? And the Army, the Navy are really good at saying, what are we looking for? Why are you here? And what are we hoping to achieve? And Civvy Streets we need 10 FTE.
Don't forget the Air Force.
Yes, they're really good. Whenever the others have to fight, they always give them a lift.
I won't have that. I won't have that as a scaly brat.
No, actually, that in itself is really interesting because it makes it sound like the Army, Navy, Air Force, etc., all get along, like they've all got this,
Oh
and
God,
that's
no.
not the case at all. They need an event to coalesce around. They need a crisis or a mission, in which case everybody knows what I'm contributing towards it. But in peace times, they all fight over the same funding. They all take the mick out of each other because you're
Yeah.
not part of our tribe. And importantly, they practice wartime. They practice, when are we under stress? What do we do when we go wrong? Again, in Civvy Street, we never do any of that. We
No.
never stress test our processes or our people.
Well, let's be honest, kind of like disaster recovery or business continuity was always oh God, do we have to?
Yeah.
Do we have to do this? And then when you needed it, you're like, oh, I wish we'd done this a bit more often.
The military know that nothing is going to go to plan. They plan and plan and plan and plan, and contingency and backups, and that everything is planned to the nth degree. But they recognize that all of that's going to go out the window at some point. So they anticipate that change is normal, that friction is normal. Civilian contexts, we plan a bit, and then we stick to the plan. We stick to we've got this project on. The project manager's just been called for jury duty. He's going to be out for don't know how long. Right, let's down tools, stop, rescope, bring in somebody. Can you imagine that on a mission? If somebody gets taken out, we just go, right, let's turn the ship around, boys.
Come on, we've had a good go.
Yeah, no, that's not how it works, because we know why we're here and we know why it's important what we're trying to achieve, and we're just unintentionally not great at doing that. In being very clear on what that North Star, what that vision, what that mission is.
Now we're going to talk about some of the kind of recognition and feedback and amazing number of reviews and how the book has been received. But I wanted to ask you, have you had, either in the academic world or the business world, let's say, have you had any interesting challenges that stick out, or interesting debates, questions that you maybe didn't expect?
There's been quite a few that have almost misinterpreted what the book is really about. And it's partly because we're in a bit of a clickbait society. We tend to read the headline and not necessarily the story. So, for example, the heading on the back of the book, and you should judge a book by its cover, is what if leadership didn't need a leader? And the description that you see on Barnes and Noble or Foyles or Waterstones, etc., talks about a model of leaderless leadership. And with just those two pieces of information, people have gone, well, that won't work. It's going to be some sort of commune where, we let the lunatics take over the asylum.
Yeah.
And I'm not advocating for leaderless leadership. The answer to any psychologist question that they're asked is it depends, or it's more complicated than that. There are times when you need traditional, even command and control style autocratic leadership, that kind of JFDI, this is what we're doing, crack on with it. There are other times where when you can let go of the steering wheel and let everybody else contribute, that actually you outperform traditionally led teams. But it's about recognizing what do you need to let people take their hand off the steering wheel. And that's what the book's about. So the challenges that I've had tend to come from this, you're just being idealistic, let's do away with leaders. It's yeah, that's not what it means at all. For people that have read the book, like you say, they tend to really enjoy it. I don't know if other people have heard differently, because as the author, people don't tend to come to you and go, that was terrible, that was, mate. Although one of the advanced readers did come to me, and I really appreciated it, because I gave her a copy. She's the chair of the Association for Business Psychology, Dr. Dawn Nicholson. And she wrote back to me and said, great book, so what? So there was a bit more. It's why this
Mm.
and why now? Why have you written the book, and why is it important that it gets out now? And that kind of feedback and having the ability to be candid and say, this is what I really think and this is what I'm missing, totally changed the way both the introduction and the epilogue were written. And it helped change some of the parts in the middle about positioning why it's important.
Mm.
Getting rid of leaders, that's a quirky, novel idea. But actually, when you look at things like, how do we govern the ethics and the laws around AI? How do we tackle growing far right and global populism movements? How do we tackle climate change? None of these things happen in one country, let alone in one leader. So it allowed me to reframe it to say, this is why it matters. It matters in the home because people take the work home with them, but it also gives us another way of looking at leadership for some of these big global systemic issues that we have.
I think I definitely think it's needed. We could talk politics all day long, but this kind of the cult of personality where the leader has all of the answers, and we can see that across the pond has always been a concern of mine, and just an area of interest as well as to why that might happen. But I think you're dead right when you look at some of the challenges that we are facing. Even now, there's Andy Burnham coming in is kind of like, oh, suddenly the Labour Party have a bit of a bounce in their step, and you think surely that is telling you that there are problems where one person is determining how you feel about what you're trying to do for the country, and it's really, really interesting. So again, another kind of interesting part of what you've written.
We could talk all day. If I remember rightly, didn't you study politics?
I did, yes. Yeah. Politics and international relations. I try and stay away from it especially on LinkedIn. I think it's I'm very much for supporting causes where I feel where you can see the outputs of injustice, but as to where we're at, and I find it thoroughly interesting. Read about it every day. Interestingly, the time I studied it, we kind of worked through over the 3 years, ending up purposefully with America as having the system in place that a lot of the other places where we'd studied were aspiring to get to. And this was checks and balances, division of power, the importance of that kind of transition from one leader to the other, and to see that being purposefully in some cases and systematically broken down, even through not appointing federal employees on purpose to let departments kind of fall flat on their face has been, again, it's fascinating.
Well, to bring it back to leadership, I mean, there's a style of leadership called charismatic leadership, which is where you have a figurehead who people give charisma to. So charisma is a relational trait. It's like, you're not charismatic, like I decide if you've got charisma and so on. But one of the ways that charismatic leadership thrives is it's great in a crisis, because we look to this one, usually a man, but this Boris Johnson type who's funny, or they've got the answers. So there's an old adage that if you show me the KPI, I'll show you the behavior you get. And that's the same in contact centers or anywhere else. And if the KPI is staying in power and you are a charismatic leader, then the behavior you get is an apathy towards solving crises, because I need the crisis to coalesce the masses around. So we have to be aware of the systems that we work in. And all Constellation does is say, consider the system intentionally. You're going to get a culture whether you like it or not. It's a social phenomenon, and it happens by design or default, and design is always better. But the question is, are you designing your culture to encourage the behaviors that make your business, your team, your country more successful? Or are you doing things because it feels right and it's nice, and you don't have to be mad to work here, but it helps? Because
Yeah.
there's a lot of places like that that are great places to work that go out of business.
Mm. Now, let's finish with the recognition that you've received,
Oh, the
and
uncomfortable bit.
the uncomfortable bit. So you are one of the finalists in the leadership section, Business Book of the Year. That is amazing.
It's I tell you what I find odd. Like, I admire a lot of leadership, kind of thought leaders. John Amici is one of my heroes. I mean, I'm a big basketball fan, and he was the first NBA player from Britain, even though he doesn't like basketball. Um, but I've always admired his work. The Promises of Giants is one of my favourite books. His book was also in the running and didn't make the final. And there's a little bit of me that's like, that's ace. Brené Brown's latest book didn't make the final. And these are gods to me. So I'm really chuffed to have made the final, but I am super competitive with myself. When I passed my MBA, I needed 70% to get a distinction. I got 92. And the very first thought that went through my mind was, where did I lose points? I can't pat myself on the back. I'm not competitive with anyone else, as you'll know if you spent time with me. But I hold myself to very, very high standards. And there's a little bit of me that's like, I'd really like it. I should be happy with just being a finalist and beating some of my heroes. Yeah.
Well, it's some achievement, mate. It really is.
And it's up for a couple of others. So it won its first award last week or 2 weeks ago. So the Thinkers 360 Global Thought Leadership Awards, it got silver, it got second place. So that's the first official one. And later today, I think the Institute of Leadership are announcing their Books of the Year finalists, and fingers crossed it will be in there too. So yeah,
you'll need a new shelf behind you.
I actually need to clear some of these books out. I've got a whole stack of books to my right hand side that I've read that I've got nowhere to put in here. So part of me is, I don't know if you can see this on the podcast, but part of me is I've obviously read all these. But I don't know if it should become like an advert or something, given the amount of work that I do from the shed quarters. If I should have pull up banners or something, or if it should just continue to look a little bit like a shoffice or a shed quarters.
Whatever makes you happiest.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Winning would make me happy.
Well, honestly, fingers crossed. And like I said earlier, I know I'm one of many that are just, I feel proud that I know you, and I'm like, he has done. This is brilliant. It's a great book. If you are listening or watching and you haven't yet read it, get yourself a copy. Check out the shortlist and see why it's there, and they should have a bit that shows the people that you have beaten.
Well, I've beaten, basically there's 12 in the final, so I've beaten every other book in the world. I think that's how I use the same rationale.
That is how it works.
Yeah, if I beat up a 6-year-old who's a green belt, that makes me a green belt as well, right?
More than.
Yeah, that's how it works. But there are some fabulous books. I'm currently working my way through the other 11. And there are some great books in there. Ian Pettigrew's Hope is a Strategy is a great book, for example. Stephen D'Souza's book is a really good example. In fact, my money would be on Stephen's book winning, just because I'm quite tough and competitive on my own stuff. But yes, it's a genuine privilege. And I won't say humbled, because I hate that word. The fact you're saying I feel this and telling people negates the fact that you're humble. But I am proud. I am proud.
Well, so you should be. And like I say, if you haven't already read it, get a copy, get copies for people you work with, because I do feel like it engenders the right type of conversations. It makes you think about what is our culture, what are we doing, what are we, to your point earlier, what are we intentional about, and it's a thoroughly good read as well. You can kind of, I haven't yet listened to the audiobook. I don't know if I next time I'm on a journey, I'm going to put Danny in the car with me.
I met someone for a meeting not long ago, and they'd been listening to me driving to come and meet me for the first time, which is a little odd. But the thing that was funny was that they listened to all their audiobooks on 1.3 speed. So there was almost this like,
there's something wrong with him. Is he drunk?
You talk a little bit slower than I was expecting. Yeah, and with less bass, because I had an editor go and sort the audio and stuff out. Because of just a random fact, when you record an audiobook, there is a very slim window of decibels that you're allowed to be in, which is why I had to go away to an audio engineer. Because if you're driving, you don't suddenly want a big spike in the decibels and you end up having an accident. Yeah, that was one of those super interesting things as I'm recording and trying not to get excited about something.
This voyage you've been on. Well, Danny, really looking forward to when we chat again, and best of luck for not only the business book, but what was the other one? The Institute.
The Institute of Leadership.
Institute of Leadership. Come on.
Fingers crossed, yeah.
Fingers crossed. But thank you very much for coming on. Don't forget us. And as I said, I've got my signed copy up there, just waiting. I'm going to keep it. I'm not going to sell it.
Is like I say, I'm not sure if it'll be worth more or less. But I'm just, you're in the book as one of the acknowledgements, because there are certain people in this world that are endlessly and altruistically working towards making work better, and that's what I've learned from you. That's part of the reason that you made the specific acknowledgements in the back. So thank you, Martin.
No, thank you. I'm recording that and I'm sending that to my mum and dad. Danny, thank you so much.
You're a star, Mart.
So are you, buddy. Has he finished? Let's go.